Hello, Janelle. Just gonna wait till a few more people join us. Hello, hello. Hello, Jessica, Dominic, hello. Hi, everybody. Happy Easter if you're doing Easter. Happy long weekend if you're just enjoying the long weekend. Even though the last couple weeks feel like one long weekend to me. I don't know if anyone else feels like that. Hi, Ev. I'm just waiting till a few people join us and then we'll get started on our project. Definitely take a moment if you want to get a drink of water to grab it right now. Hello, Envision Resolution. And if you want to put on some music, I don't have any music going where I am right now, so if you want to put on some background music for yourself, oh hi AJ, then you can go ahead and do that now. If there's something peaceful you want to listen to, if you just want to be in a quiet space with your own thoughts, that's great too. I am going to just go through some of the things that we had on our list of supplies for today to make sure everyone has what they need. This is a chance for you to grab them if you don't. So a pencil and eraser, whatever kind of pencil you have. Even if you don't have an eraser, it's probably okay at this point, but pencil and eraser is a good thing to have handy. And then I suggested that people bring a pen of some kind, so a ballpoint pen is fine if that's what you have. Even if it's not black, go with what you have. You could also be using like a felt tip pen, like one of these. This is probably what I'll use today because I find these a little bit easier to draw with, but a ballpoint pen, a regular ballpoint pen is also great. So have those handy with you. If you don't have either of those, if you have a thin black marker, that would also work really well. And then we need some paper. I'm just going to use a couple of sheets of offcuts of watercolor paper that I had, but if you're drawing in a sketchbook or if you're on a notebook or lined paper, honestly, if you're drawing on the back of a receipt, go for it. Whatever you have handy, use what you got. And then markers. So you could have some fancy art markers with lots of different colors. If you have something like that, that's great. You might be using highlighters. This will work as well. Highlighters are actually, believe it or not, an awesome art tool. They have a lot of possibilities. They're great for mixing colors, believe it or not. So if you're using highlighters, that's great. Even if you only have a few colors, I'm going to probably use these Crayola markers today because I just liked the colors. I thought they were kind of fitting for the weekend. So that's what I'm going to use. But whatever you have with you, just use whatever you've got. And we're going to get started. So just thinking about in terms of drawing for relaxation, we want to try to bring ourselves into a calm, peaceful space. Drawing should not be painful. It should not be uncomfortable. It should not make you frustrated. I'm hoping that you're in a safe, calm, quiet place right now. That would be great to be able to participate in the activity. Just like last week, we're going to do two drawings. So we'll start with kind of a simpler one, and then we'll get into one that's a little bit more complex. So I just have a scrap piece of paper here, just to show you a couple of shapes that we're going to start off with. We're going to start drawing kind of a garden motif to start off with, but you can take it in any direction. So we're going to do some pretty simple shapes, and then you can switch to your color. So I'm just going to show you. So we have circles, then we have what I would call a blob shape. So this is like, these can be different each time you do them. It doesn't have to be a regular shape. This one has, you can have sharp edges or soft edges. That would be a blob. And then we've got little circles. We can do little circles. We can do circles with openings as well. It doesn't have to be colored in. And we're going to do some of these shapes, which I'm sure everyone can draw, an asterisk. You can also draw them this way if this is easier for you. If you want to have an irregular number of points or something a little more organic looking, this is another way to do it. And finally, we're going to do something like a flower shape, which really is a bunch of ovals just all connecting into one point. It doesn't matter how many petals are on your flower shapes. If you've got 5 or 6 or even 4, whatever you've got is totally fine. So nothing intimidating. Hopefully these are all things that everyone's comfortable drawing. Just relax and go with it. And if all else fails, turn your shape into a blob. If you tried to do something and it didn't work out, turn it into a blob. We can still use the blobs here. So no mistakes. We're not even going to start with a pencil. We're just going to go right in with the markers. So I'm going to just put this up here as kind of a reference. Then I'm going to grab my first drawing paper. And like I said, we're doing kind of a garden motif or a floral motif. So we're just going to go irregularly. Pick whatever colors bring you the most amount of joy. Whatever colors you feel like are the most pleasurable to look at. Maybe that's only 1 or 2 colors. That's fine. Let's start with some circles. So you can draw a couple of big circles on your paper. And a couple of little circles on your paper. And I'm just going totally randomly and irregularly. I might do 6 or 7 circles in this color. You decide how many you want to do, where you want to put them. No rhyme or reason. Just relax. Try and be kind of random with it if you can. You don't have to copy my drawing. It's just one way to do it. So I've got a few circles there. I started with purple because I really love purple. But I'm going to switch to another color now, and I'm going to switch to another shape. If you want to continue drawing with the same color, that's fine as well. I think I'm going to switch to maybe blue for a little while. So I'm going to start doing some blob shapes now with my blue, and just like I did the circles, all different placements on the paper and all different sizes, I'm going to do the same with the blobs. So I'm going to just start drawing blobs wherever I think looks good. You draw them wherever you think looks good. You can do big blobs, little blobs, complicated blobs. Just trying to fill in as much of the area on this paper as possible. If you're using a bigger sheet of paper, maybe you want to just work on half, or you can draw your blobs a lot bigger, your shapes a lot bigger. It's up to you. Take some deep breaths as you're doing this. Try to just let your mind focus on what's in front of you. If you're using Sharpies, that's totally fine if they're color. Just put something underneath your paper so that it doesn't bleed through onto your desk. So I've just got some blob shapes all over. And again, switch colors as you feel appropriate. If you want to stick with this color and you want to do some circles with this color, that's fine too. You can mix and match. It doesn't have to be each color is its own shape. I'm just doing that for my own entertainment. All right, I'm going to switch to another color. I'm going to start putting in some of these star shapes or asterisk shapes that we looked at earlier. So what is this? This is like a teal or a lighter blue, I think. I'll put a couple of these in. So I'll draw some. It's very similar to the blue, that's okay. I'll draw some like an asterisk, like a star, and I might do some the other way that I showed you, where you're just starting from one point and putting these points all over. Do as many or as little as you wish. If you're clumping yours all together in the center of the page, that's great. You could do them as a border of a page, however you wish. We're going to turn these all into kind of more floral shapes to fill in the garden in a little bit. So do as many of these asterisk shapes as you want. And again, try and change the sizes a little bit, maybe some larger and some smaller. And now I'm going to do some of my flower shapes. So some of these kind of ovals that are connected in the center. And again, it doesn't matter how many petals are on your ovals. You decide for yourself. So maybe I'll switch to something different, maybe a pink. Well, it's very light, but that's okay. Hopefully you can still see that color. As I'm drawing, I'm going to actually slow myself down a little bit. I know I tend to draw very quickly, especially when I'm excited, so I'm very happy everyone joined me today. It made me very, very excited to do this. But But I'm going to slow down a little bit so I can really get into the process of focusing on what I'm doing here and drawing these flowers with a bit of intention. So again, feel free to mix and match your shapes. You don't have to do all of your flowers in one color, so I might even add in a couple of little circles in this pink color since I have it in my hand. Fill in some spaces that I see. I'm starting to get a pretty crowded page, which is lovely. I might start looking for places to put things now in between other shapes. That's kind of my next goal. So I'm going to do one more color, I think. So that's 4 colors I've got. Maybe you've only done 2 colors or 3 colors. Maybe you've done 6 or 7 different colors. Either way is great. I think I'm going to switch to some yellow. And I'm going to really, again, try it right now. I'm going to do a mix of all of the different shapes, maybe, and I'm going to try and fill in some of the spaces that I see on my page. So wherever I see a big gap, that's a very bright yellow. Wherever I see a big gap, I might start to fill in with some of these different shapes. So I've got a circle and a blob, some of the flower shapes. I put lots of little circles in here. I'm not even worried about 2 of the same kind of shape being beside each other. I think it's totally fine, however you're filling in your page. Just be kind of loose with it and just let your own artistic sense, your intuition kind of fill in the spots here. Hopefully you've got a nice full page full of different shapes, or a full half page. You can let me know in the comments if I'm going a bit too quickly for you, if you need me to slow down, or if it's okay. That would be great. So I started off with the circles, worked on some blobs, added in some petal shapes and some asterisk shapes, and I've just mixed and matched all of my colors as I went through. I used 5 different colors in my drawing. If you're, like I said, if you're using 2 or 3 or just even 1 color, whatever you choose to do here is fine. There's no right or wrong. Thank you for the affirmation. I appreciate it. So now that I've got this whole kind of pattern set up, and just as a side note, if anybody finds this kind of interesting and therapeutic, another way to break yourself if you're finding yourself feeling very stressful or having a lot of anxiety, another way to approach this exercise is actually to draw all of these shapes with your non-dominant hand. So you do exactly the same thing that we just did. You can use any colors, a mix of colors, but instead of drawing with your dominant, I'm right-handed, so I would draw with my right hand. I could actually switch to my left hand and draw these shapes. And just changing your physical relationship to something like this that's pretty routine and standard really helps to break you out of kind of an emotional space a little bit. So it gives you some room to breathe because you're focusing so hard on doing something that's a little bit challenging. And because these shapes are very simple, like I said, any of them can be turned into a blob if that's what happens. There's really no right or wrong. There's no mistakes you can make when you do it. So that's just something you could try if you wanted to. All right, hopefully everyone has filled in their page. I'm going to grab my felt tip pen. I'm using a black felt tip pen today, but if, like I said, if you're using just a ballpoint pen, it's great. Whatever you're using, just go with it. Even if you're using a black marker right now, that's fine as well. So I'm going to start looking at some of my shapes that I've got here, and I'm going to start to turn some of these into flowers. So one way I can do that, for example, with a circle shape, is I can just draw a spiral right over the circle. It starts to become kind of a rose shape. So I might turn some of my circle shapes into these roses. And I'm just drawing a spiral. I'm doing it very tightly. But I'm just drawing this shape, just really, really tightly wound. I'm doing that over top of some of my circle shapes. And you can try doing a left-handed coil or a right-handed coil, or clockwise or counterclockwise, and see if one of those ways feels more comfortable to you than the other way. So now I've got some kind of rose shapes filling in. Another way to turn some of these shapes into flowers, thinking about something maybe more like a marigold. So I'm going to start by just doing these little loops, and as I go around, I'm still actually going in a spiral. As I go around, I'm just making them a little bit bigger, going on the outside. You can stop whenever you feel you're ready to stop. I like to go a little bit outside of the color, but you can stay within the color that you drew. So you might turn some of your shapes, even some of the blobs, you could turn those into these kind of tightly petaled flowers. And you can decide how many petals you want to put on there, if you want it to be in a regular shape or an irregular shape. Anything you do here is going to look great. So I'm going to start filling in maybe some more of my round shapes, the circles, with some of these kind of small petals going in a circle. I'm not so worried about how my lines really end up, if I've overlapped, if I've smudged a little bit. It's all okay. I'm just here to do the drawing. It's really less about the outcome, it's more about the process. So put your lines down with a bit of intention and a bit of focus. If you're feeling stressed out or this is challenging for you, then go back to something that's easier or something calmer to focus on. You can just continue to draw circles or spirals. It's kind of a nice meditative motion. All right, I'm going to look at some of my blob shapes. And for the blob, I'm going to put a center into this to make it into the center of a flower. And I'm going to just add some sticks coming off, and it doesn't matter how many lines come off the edge of the circle. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, however many happens is fine. And then I'm going to trace around the edge of the blob, and then these will each become petals of a flower. And I can decide even in the middle. Happy accidents is a great word. Someone just posted that. That's a great way to describe it. I'm going to decide to put some little lines in here coming off the center of the flower. And in the middle, you can either color this in, you could fill it in with polka dots, you could fill it in with lines. I'm going to try another one of those blob flowers. So just taking one of the blob shapes that I had, I'm going to draw a circle in the middle, and then it's just as many sticks as I think will fit coming off of it. And then from there, I'm just going to trace around to make the petals for this flower. A couple of little lines coming off of there like a starburst. This one I'm going to fill it in with like a grid, a little bit of a lattice work. So continue going through each of these flowers. We'll do a couple more shapes, but I'm looking right now for all of my blobs. I'm going to start to turn all my blobs into these kind of petaled flowers. I don't know if they look like pansies or what they look like. You can let me know if they look like a flower to you, a specific kind of flower. Let me know. Even these little ones, maybe they just have fewer petals. I like these ones with the irregular shape, violets. They look like violets. They do look like violets. I like these ones with the irregular petal shapes because it's a little bit more organic. So just continue to connect the lines and fill in some of those shapes with petals. And again, how you treat the center of these flowers is totally up to you. So here's one circle that I missed earlier. So I'm going to actually do the same thing with this one. Just put petals around it. Whoops. Now, depending on how many flowers you drew or how many shapes you drew on your page, this may take you longer than it's going to take me, but just do as much of it as you can right now if you're enjoying it. And continue to just let yourself draw the way that it's coming out. However it happens is how it's meant to happen. Don't get too caught up on what it should look like or how it should be. We're not really here for that. We're here just to focus on something different than the news, different than our social media, different than the TV. There's something in front of us that we have total control over. That's just here for us to experience, and not really for anyone else. Even as I'm speaking with you, I'm making sure that I'm taking lots of breaths. And I'm enjoying having little choices to make as I go through it. Sometimes I'm putting dots in the middle. Sometimes I'm putting grid in the middle. I could even try putting a spiral in the middle of one of these blob shapes. I'm turning them all into little flowers. So I'm having lots of little art making decisions to make, but whatever I choose is totally fine. There's no right or wrong or rhyme or reason to this. I'm going to switch over to some of my flower shapes. I think those were the next ones, or the asterisks, so you can treat these both the same way. So I'm going to put a center into my flower, and for these ones, I'm just going to trace over the petals that I already drew with the marker. So now again, I get to choose in the middle. Do I want to draw something in here, or just leave it as it is, or color it? You can go back and change your mind too. If you start with one thing, you can layer over it or just color it in. This one I might just put some dots in the middle. Going to try another one here. Draw a big circle in the middle. This time when I do my petals, I'm going to put a little cleft shape or a little heart shape at the end of them, just to give it a little bit of something different to look at. You don't have to do yours that way, it's just an idea. I want to break them up into a slightly different shape. This one in the middle, I might put a spiral. So now I'm looking for all of those petal floral shapes, starting to trace over. Maybe you can do a pointed petal on some of these instead of a rounded petal. That's another way to change the shape and have a little bit of control. Again, you can fill the center with something different each time. I think I have one or two more of these on my page. If you can find a time in your week or your day to do some drawing like this, where you're just kind of seeing what happens, just letting your creative side take control and make some of the decisions, it does help to kind of refocus you and ground you and alleviate a little bit of anxiety or stress you might have. Although I've learned that a lot of people have stress and anxiety about drawing, this kind of drawing in particular is quite simple. All of the shapes and even the lines that we've drawn are things that we commonly use in our writing every day. So hopefully none of this is too tricky for you or finding it too overwhelming. If you do find yourself getting a little confused or overwhelmed, you can let me know. You can also send me a message later and let me know if that was your experience. I'd appreciate it. But take a little break or take a step away and just watch for a while and catch your breath, and then come back to it when you're ready. So I'm going to head over to some of my asterisk shapes, some of those starburst shapes. I'm going to kind of treat them the same way as I treated some of these other flowers that we just did. So I'm going to put a center in them, and I'm going to trace over these as little tiny petals this time and fill in the center. You can also just do a dot in the middle. You don't have to do an open circle, so that's another way to finish these off. I really like these shapes. These are probably my favorite out of all of the flowers because I think they are the most irregular and the most interesting. We don't think about that shape. We probably have drawn it many times. We don't think about it that much until we're tracing around our own lines. So I'm just switching. Some of the centers I'm making big circles, and some of the centers I'm making little circles. You do you here, whatever you think. you might, oh, I missed a flower here. You might have a point where you feel like you want to go back with your markers and maybe fill in some extra spots or add some more colors to things. You can do that as well. Just because we switch to black pen doesn't mean we have to stay with it. We can always go back afterwards. So I've got a few more of these little asterisk shapes to trace. This is kind of like a reverse coloring book. Because usually we draw the lines and then we fill in our shapes with color. And this time we've started with the color. We're tracing around our own marks. It's just a different process for our brains to get used to. But the act of tracing something is a good way to focus on something as well. It requires a lot of your kind of bandwidth to be able to trace something carefully, which is a good distraction from the other things that are happening in your life or in your day. I think I've just got one more little asterisk over here to work on. Hopefully you're working around the same pace that I'm at. You're just about finished tracing most of your shapes. I think the only ones I have left are my tiny little circles. And I'll show you what my plan is for those. And you can either leave them as little circles or you can turn them into flowers as well. So I think for myself, when I find one of those little circles, I'm going to actually just add petals around it so that they become whatever color my paper is. In this case, my paper is white. So I'm going to add the petals around, and then the circle that I drew with the marker will become the center. And these ones, some of them, if I have room, I'm going to make them really, really long petals. You could also make them really short petals. You can also do some little stubby petals too. That works. You could also do what we did with some of these bigger circles and do a series of petals going around that center. Got lots of ways now to fill in some of those empty spaces on your page. And as a whole, I'm seeing that the garden, or my garden picture, is kind of becoming very full, which I really enjoy. I picked colors that really are nice for me to look at, that I enjoy. If you're working with pencil crayons, this will work as well. Crayons are a little bit hard, but hopefully you're having good success with your materials that you brought today. So I'm just continuing to look for any shapes that I haven't touched yet. I'm just nearing the end of my flowers. We've been drawing already for almost 30 minutes, which is really amazing. Hi, Steph. So just continue to find those shapes. Create your own shape for petals. Maybe they don't have to all be the same kind of daisy pattern. Maybe some of them are pointed as they go around those small circles. They could also be the petals that have that little cleft shape in them. You have lots of choices here on how you finish these off. Can't wait for the spring to be in full bloom, and hopefully it'll be at a time when we're all able to go out and enjoy it, not just from our windows. Maybe you have some flowers in your house you can use for reference, or just work from your imagination. Might fill in some of these centers with some patterns, but you don't have to. You can leave them just as they are. So I've done all of my flowers. I've drawn over all of the marker shapes that I had started with. I've got some big gaps on my page, and for these big gaps I'm just going to add in some leaves. So I'm going to draw some stems on some of my flowers, and I'm going to just add in some leaf shapes. And we talked about this shape last week. It's just like a football shape is one way to draw a leaf. You can put a line through the middle of it. You can also do a heart-shaped leaf if you want to, this way, or actually it can go the other way as well. So you have a few options, or you could even do some little loop leaves, little teardrop leaves. You have some choices here. If you don't have leaves in the middle, you don't have to. You could fill in the centers with spirals. You could add more flowers to them. It's your drawing, so you decide how you think it should be finished. But don't worry about making mistakes here. Just let whatever happens happen. All we can really do is have control over the things we have control over, and there's a lot going on we don't have control over. So this is just one little thing to focus on in our day that's positive, just for us. Hopefully fun. Hopefully enjoyable for you. So I'm just looking for any other spots where I see a big open space, and I'm adding in some leaves. I might do a couple of different leaves on here just to have something different. Looks like a beautiful day outside again. Really lovely. Hopefully you can get some fresh air. Some fresh air and some sunshine on you, even if it's just sitting by the window. So I filled in pretty much all of the spots on my paper that had some big gaps. I'm seeing some little ones. I'm just going to put some dotted lines in there to fill them in, but it's really up to you how you finish this off. If your flowers are really close together, you might not have room for the leaves to go in, and that's okay too. Just means your garden's a little bit more full. So I think looking at this drawing, which we're just about finished, and seeing all of these different shapes and the way that we finish them off, again, this is just an easy activity to do. You can even doodle this while you're in a Zoom call. Just something to focus on, and the active tracing is a really good way to bring your breathing in check and kind of get into a meditative state a little bit. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm going to do one more short activity. So this was about 30 minutes. We'll do another kind of 30 minutes activity. Welcome to stay for that one, or you can continue working on the garden. If you're finished, that's fine too. But I'm going to switch over. If you didn't finish your plants and you want to finish them later, then definitely work on them later and send me a picture of them when you finish. I'd love to see how everyone's gardens turned out. I'm sure they're very different than mine. I actually did this pretty much every day this week just to get myself in the zone for Sunday, and every time I did the activity it turned out quite different. So I'm excited to see what you came up with and how your pictures all turned out. So I'm going to switch here to another activity. And if you're using a big sheet of paper or a big sketchbook, I would suggest working on a half size. I don't know how I'm out of focus there. Hopefully it comes back in focus. There we go. I'm going to start with my pencil, and I'm going to start by picking a word that that I feel connects to the moment, and maybe is a word that I can look to in the weeks to come or in the days to come, and kind of have it as an anchor or something to focus me. So this might be a word of affirmation. There might be a word that already you use to ground yourself, to focus on your breathing. If you're into meditation, maybe it's a word that you use in your meditation. It could be an incantation. So pick a word. These are just some suggestions that I was thinking about, but maybe there's a word that really resonates with you in a personal way. So I had gratitude, peace, love, relax or relaxation, joy, thankful, gratefulness, clarity, focus, chill, calm, breathe, hope, love, serenity, good or goodness, and grace. But pick a word for you that you feel like really connects to either a direction you want to have or something that grounds you, that'll ground you and ground your breathing and your focus or your intention for the next couple days or next couple weeks, as we're in this kind of uncertain situation. I did a few of these again this week, and I chose serenity was one of my words, and joy was one of my words. I can show you those in a minute. But I think for today, I'm going to use the word focus, but you choose whatever word makes sense for you. If you have a suggestion for a word as well, you can put it in the comments, and maybe other people that are struggling to come up with one, they might like your suggestion as well. So I chose choosing focus for today. So I'm just going to use my pencil, and I'm going to quickly write out the word focus on my paper. I am not concerned about my quality of my printing. Hopefully you can see that. I'm really just want to get the word on the page. If you find that it's a long word and you've had to squish it, you can either erase it or flip to the other side of your paper, just so that the word is kind of big, fills in a lot of the space. Capitals, lowercase, cursive. If you're into handwriting, go for handwriting, or calligraphy. You can do whatever style of writing feels right for you. But I chose my word focus, and I'm going to go in again, starting off with my markers. So I'm going to first start off by tracing the word. I'm going to pick my colors here. So I think this time I'll use this pink. Right, pink is a nice, it's kind of purple. It's all right. I'm going to trace my letters for the word focus. So whatever your word is, just trace it with the markers. And again, if you're using handwriting or capital letters, whatever suits you is totally fine. I'm going to make my letters a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to kind of trace around my initial lines just to make the letters a little bit bolder. If you're really comfortable with lettering, you have lots of choices here you can make to make these more unique or more fancy or more simple. It's totally up to you. I'm just going with my own printing and tracing the letters in the same color. Because I've gone over it a few times, it's creating kind of a neat bubble effect here. I've got my word focus. And now with another colored marker. So again, whatever colors bring joy to you, or colors that you really like looking at, whatever you have with you, use the color that you really kind of connect with. With this color, I'm going to just draw some lines. I'm actually going to go through my word a little bit. Now you could do straight lines or curvy lines, or even if you want to do a circle, you can do however you wish. Just some irregular lines. I don't think you need to use a ruler for this. Just have some kind of organic shapes going through the word. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. Maybe I'll add one more in here, but you could do as many as you want. The more lines you do, the more complicated your design will be, and the less lines you do, the simpler it will be. So you can keep that in mind, but just let it happen. Just be organic again, just like we were with the flowers. We'll see what happens with this. So now I've divided my paper into all of these sections. I'm going to start to color in some of these sections, and with my marker I can even make some patterns. So you can do this with the felt tip pen as well. We're going to go in after with a little bit of felt tip pen, but I'm going to start to do some patterns to fill in some of these shapes. So I just did a stripe pattern there with my marker. It seems to go a lot faster with marker than it does with the pen. So this is a good way to cover a lot of space quickly. And as I'm coloring or starting to do these patterns, I'm going to keep repeating this word, or at least having this word, my chosen word of intention, just kind of keep it in my mind. So I'm going to, in my head, I'm really kind of saying focus, focus, focus to myself, because that's kind of my intention for the next couple days or the next couple weeks, is that I have a clear focus and direction for myself. So even as I'm doing this coloring, I'm just repeating that sentiment or believing those words so that it becomes part of this art piece as well. Hello, Antonio. So I started with stripes as one of my patterns. It's a really easy one to fill in a lot of space. I'm going to start with pick another color and try and do a different pattern. If you're already skipping ahead, you kind of get where this is going, then please feel free to fill in with whatever kind of patterns you wish. If you want to stick with me at this pace and do them as I do them, then that's fine too. This one I'm going to do some circles, I think, to fill in this whole shape here with this light pink. So some big circles and maybe some half circles on the edges. And again, as I'm filling in these shapes, I'm thinking about my word of affirmation. And the act of making this art piece is part of solidifying this intention in my mind. I'm just going to pick another space at random here to fill in. This one is with circles. So use whatever materials you have. Do as much or as little detail as you wish. Just for the timing of today, I'm doing kind of bigger patterns with the markers. It's a little bit faster. And I'm going to pick a third color. I really liked that kind of peachy pink, so I'm going to try this other pink color. This time I might do some wavy shapes. Whoops, I think that's the same marker. Yep, this one's a peachy one. So I might do some wavy shapes, some waved lines to fill in this shape. Now with my markers, I'm able to go right over my words. It depends on what color you've chosen. You might have to go around your words if it's a darker color to fill this in. The other thing you can do, and again, depends on your markers or your materials, but most of them should work fine, is you could go back to some of these other spaces and fill in the gaps so that you're coloring in the whole space, not just making a pattern with one color, but actually having two colors in the pattern. So that's another way to work here. I think it actually looks kind of nice when some of them are colored in more, so I'm going to go back and fill some of these in, but you don't have to do that now. You could do that later, or you can not do it at all. We talked about it a little bit last week, that coloring is a good way to focus yourself when things feel a little bit chaotic around you. There's a lot of adult coloring books out there, if that's something that you're interested in. Or kids coloring books for that matter. But it's a nice way to have something to focus on. I chose focus, but it's a nice way to have something to focus on. Might do one more with this peachy color over here, maybe another wavy one. Taking some deep breaths as I go through this process. Filling in as much of the space as I want, or as much or as little as you want. I'm going to pick another color now. I've got, I think, 5 more spaces to go on my drawing. This one I might do more like a triangle pattern. Just kind of fill it in just like I did with the polka dots, but fill this one in with some triangle shapes. You can come up with an interesting pattern for yourself. Or you can copy these ones. So any way you want to do it is totally fine. But just make sure that as you're doing it, you are enjoying it, that it's not becoming frustrating or challenging or tedious. If it is, then switch to a different space or switch to a different color or change the kind of drawing that you're doing. It should never be painful or uncomfortable for you. If drawing was painful, nobody would want to do it. But lots of people do want to do it because it does bring a lot of joy and relaxation and focus to people. So I'm really trying to keep this word in my mind as I'm going through the process here of coloring on all these spaces. I might just color in some spaces without doing a pattern at all. You can do that. Or you could color them in and then add a pattern over top as well. It's another way to do it. It might work differently with your markers. I'm using Crayola markers. It might work differently depending on what kind of markers you have with you. But this piece of art that you're making right now, this is something that for the next couple days or the next week or so, you can have placed somewhere in your home, in your space, that, or even in your car if you have to leave the house often, if you're an essential worker, but have it somewhere that you can look at it once in a while and repeat this word to yourself. You could also redo this activity with a phrase, if there's a phrase or a mantra that you like to use, but have it somewhere in your space that you see it often and you can kind of bring that word back to yourself with some intention and some ability to use it or incorporate it into your life. So I've got 2 more spaces here to fill, but I'm looking at this big yellow space. I might put some little dots in here with a different color just to fill it in a little bit differently. Again, how you choose to fill in your spaces is up to you. We're going to use the felt tip pen in a few minutes just to do a little bit more tracing, but this is really your choice on how you make each of these spaces look. The idea here is we're just kind of letting it happen organically, going with the flow, and keeping this word, our word of affirmation, in our minds. I'm trying to think of a pattern to do for this last space, the last 2 spaces up here. I might do a combination of stripes and like maybe a dotted pattern in between the stripes. I don't know. See what happens. At the end of the day, if I don't like this art piece that much, I can put it away, or I can recycle it. But if I do like it, and it's something that the memory of making it is enjoyable, and the intention that I put into it is something I want to keep, then I can hold on to it for a while. But don't put too much pressure on yourself to make this look like anything. It's just going to be whatever it is. That's all we have, is to focus on the moment and let things happen the way that they happen. So that's what we're kind of working on here. This last space here, I'm going to just trace around the outside of the shape to fill it in. But how you fill your spaces in on each of your sections on your drawing is up to you. I would love to see some of these drawings. If anyone is comfortable to share their artwork, either post it on your Facebook or Instagram and let me know, or tag me, or you can just send it to me in a direct message on Instagram if that's something that you're comfortable with. I would love to see how they turned out, but no pressure. It's really for you to do it, not for me. So you decide what's comfortable for you. So I've got my whole space kind of colored in. If I feel like it later, I might go back in and color in some of the white spaces in between some of these areas, but I'm actually very happy with the way that this has turned out so far. I'm going to take my black felt tip pen, and I'm just going to go back and I'm going to go back over my letters. And as I'm tracing my letters again, just like we did with our flowers earlier, as I'm tracing the letters, I'm going to just kind of keep this word in my mind. My word is focus, so I'm focusing on my word. But if your word is peace or love or joy or thankfulness, whatever your word is, try to really think about what that means to you, how important it is to you, how that's a word that can ground you, and how you can kind of connect it to your breathing right now. Just let it be part of a meditative practice for you to trace over those letters. We're really tracing with intention right now. Don't forget to breathe. And if you're still coloring, that's okay. Take your time, and then when you get to the point when you're going to trace over your letters, just remember to focus on the words, take some deep breaths, and really let the meaning of that word connect to you. It's not a race, so don't rush to finish. Nobody's grading this assignment. Nobody's checking it for errors. This is just for you. It's just a practice to bring your attention onto something positive that you can control. Have something to look at for the rest of the week or the rest of the month to bring your attention to something. You can add some details to these letters if you want. If you want to add some kind of designs or patterns after the fact, you're welcome to go back and do that. This is your drawing, so you decide how much detail you want to put into these shapes. But the idea here is not just making the artwork, but also really using this process of drawing to help give meaning to those words and help them to really kind of connect and resonate within you. We're just about at the end of the drawing for today. I hope you enjoyed it and found it relaxing or invigorating. You can let me know. Sometimes drawing doesn't relax you, it kind of energizes you. Either one is okay. The idea really was to bring some of our attention into something that we can control in front of us. I'm just going to quickly show you, if you're still drawing, keep going with it. I'm going to quickly show you some of the words that I had done earlier in the week. So I had done serenity a little bit differently, and I picked all blue colors, and I picked joy was another one of the words that I thought at that moment was something that I really needed to focus on. So as I was coloring this one, I actually did with highlighters. So as I was coloring and filling in these words, I was really letting the feeling of joy fill me as I was drawing, and again the feeling of serenity, focusing on calm and concentration. And the other one I did here was relax, which I needed at that moment. I needed to focus on something detailed and something that I could control to kind of bring my focus back to the present and being in the moment. So hopefully you chose a word that is really powerful for you and meaningful for you. You can let me know. You can share some of your pictures or share your experience with me later. That would be great. And also send any questions. If you had any questions about today or anything that we did, you can let me know. But take some time for the rest of the afternoon to finish up your drawings. If you wanted to add some more details to your garden, you could do that. If you wanted to fill in some spaces on your word of affirmation, you can do that as well. I hope you enjoyed drawing today. I'm going to save this live video in my stories. I finally figured out how to do that, so that if you want to come back and do the exercise again, or if you'd like to share it with somebody, you have an opportunity to do that as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you came up with some interesting artwork today. Be safe, wash your hands, stay inside, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks.